I couldn't agree more. We're back. Number 2 pick in the draft. Feels like home. Feels like we never left. I know. I agree with DF in that when we initially fired Dorsey right after the season, I think I said on here that I think that's going to take quarterback off the board for the Browns because I feel like they're going to just go with the veteran route. That being said, everything I'm hearing is telling me that the Browns are going to go with quarterback, and I'm at the point where I agree. I think we have to go quarterback, and I know some people are saying they don't know if they're good enough to be a top 1 or 2 pick, and the way I look at this is you just keep picking one until you hit on one. You have to hit on one eventually. You're not going to get anywhere unless you have one. I saw the Bearded Browns podcast, friends of the show, they put out a chart today on X, and it was the playoff grid and all the quarterbacks in the playoffs right now. And all but 2 were first round quarterbacks, and almost all of them were top 10 picks. The only ones that weren't first round quarterbacks were Russell Wilson and Jalen Hurts. Every other quarterback who is in the playoffs was a first round draft pick. So yes, you can say, oh, take a guy in the 5th and develop him. That doesn't pan out that often. Okay.
No.
Okay. There's Tom Brady is an anomaly. Russell Wilson, quite honestly, is an anomaly. So, you just have to keep picking until you get it right. I've gotten to the point where I'm still signing just because I want to take a quarterback at 2 doesn't mean I think that we should draft them at 2 and then start them. I think you draft one at 2. You still sign a free agent vet to start this year, and I would draft 2 quarterbacks this year. I would take Cam or Shador or whatever at 2, and you get to the 4th or the 5th, and Will Howard's there, or Riley Leonard, or Dart, the guy out of Ole Miss, if he's depending where he's at. Take 2. You can't take enough. Because it's the single most important position, and you got to get it right. So give yourself as many opportunities to figure it out as you can. I would take one in the 1st. I'd take one in the middle rounds. I'd still sign a free agent, and just give yourself a chance. One of them's got to hit, eventually. Go Kirk Cousins, Robert Griffin route, because I know a lot of people are, including Josh has been banging the drum a lot for Abdul Carter out of Penn State, which we're going to talk about the draft a little bit, but I just don't. That doesn't, to me, it doesn't move the needle in the draft.
Yeah. I'm a little different. Like what I'm hearing, what I'm understanding, I get what everybody wants. They want Shador Sanders, or they want Cam Ward. I'm kind of like measuring them between last year's draft and what might come out this year. And I don't know if their grades are necessarily blown up more than they should be just because they're the only 2 quarterbacks. I'm going with Fields. I'm going with Huntley, and I'm going with Dawgs. I'm trading down. I'm going to get a pick for next year, and I'm going to draft Genty. I'm going to fix the offensive line just through the free agency. I'm going to get I forget what his name. I had it pulled up, but I had my computer issues. He's the left tackle for the Rams. It's Note Bloom, I believe.
Okay.
I'm going to get him. He's a scrappy. I'm going to put him. He's a veteran. He runs McVay's offense. Can't be that much different than Stefanski's. And that's what I'm doing to fix it up. Because what I'm hearing, we want to get back to old school Stefanski. Well, the old school Stefanski had Baker. I get that. But they also had Nick Chubb. Our running back room has nobody right now. And if Ford's watching this, I'm not calling you nobody, but you're not on the same level as Nick Chubb. And I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. And so I want Genty. I want that generational talent. And I'm running the ball. I'm committing to AFC North football, and I'm taking a look at Fields that's not getting played this year, who had a better record and looked as if he played better than Russell Wilson. He's got to be licking his chops saying, man, oh man, I want to get on the field. And I know he's saying the right things like, hey, I want to be a Steeler. I want to be this, but that's going to drive his salary up, and someone's going to pay him, and it might not be the Steelers. So let's get him, let's develop him, and let's see what happens next year. If I'm trading down from 2 to 9, though, and I get Genty, I'm probably getting another first-round pick next year. So I'm just going to take those 2 picks next year, first round, and I'm going to try and get something if it don't work this year. And that's the way I'm rolling.
So the only thing that would, if you do something like that, which I had the topics, and we'll just kind of jump around since DF talked about the draft. If you trade down people are like, you could be competitive again this year, but if you say you bring in a Kirk Cousins and you are competitive, this might sound terrible. You risk, and if you don't take a quarterback while you're here at 2, you risk being stuck in purgatory like the Steelers. Okay, if the Steelers ever want to have postseason success again, they either need to suck it up and they need to tank for a season, or they got to give up a whole bunch of draft picks to move up to get a quarterback. You've seen them. They have a good coach. They have a good defense. They have good players, but they get to the postseason and they can't match up. They don't match up at quarterback. They can't move the ball on offense. They can't do anything. If you don't take a quarterback this year and you go and you get like a Kirk Cousins, well, he's only going to be here for a year or two. And if you win 10 games, 11 games, then all of a sudden he's gone. All you did was move your rebuild down 2 years. I feel like if you're here, take one. And if Kirk Cousins hits and he's here for 2 or 3 years and he's really good, great. That means this guy you just drafted, you have 2 or 3 years to get him ready, like Jordan Love, did with the Packers. So I think there's options. You mentioned Genty, so I'll just kind of jump down here talking about draft picks we want to see. I was huge on the Genty train early. That is when I thought we were going to be picking 6th or 7th. But the more I watch Ohio State play, the more I want TreVeyon Henderson. And I don't want to sound like a homer, because a month ago I did not want TreVeyon Henderson, mostly because of his injury history. And I just feel like the Browns have gotten burnt by drafting guys who have had injury history. And it's like every time we take that guy, then he comes here and he gets hurt and he doesn't play. But if you've watched Ohio State this season, and especially into these playoffs, TreVeyon Henderson is a touchdown waiting to happen every time he touches the ball. He reminds me of Jahmyr Gibbs with the Lions. Like, he can catch the ball in the backfield. He is so fast. In his vision in the open field, he would be great in the screen game. He is a home run every single time he touches the ball. But if you do that, then you got to pair him with a David Montgomery. Who we got to go out and find his David Montgomery, because I don't want to give a guy who has an injury history, the ball 25, 30 times a game. So I think you can get TreVeyon Henderson.
You know who's David Montgomery is Junkin. Get them both.
I say that. Draft them both if you can. I think you can get TreVeyon Henderson probably in the 3rd round, at least in the mocks I've been doing. I've been getting him in the 3rd. If you don't get Judkins, you could get that Cam from Arizona State. All the mocks I've been doing, I've been able to get him in the 4th. Or
Scatterbo.
Yeah, let me throw a name at you, and some people might not like this, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be a free agent. Najee Harris. He's not crazy high efficient, but I also think that the Steelers' offense is just so bad. They've had terrible offensive coordinators for the last how long? But I think Najee Harris is a battering ram, and he can hold up the punishment. I mean, he gets the ball a lot and he can run hard. And I feel like if you paired him with like a TreVeyon Henderson, that could be a good backfield. I like Quinshon Judkins if we could draft him. But I have moved off the Genty a little bit, just because I think a guy like TreVeyon Henderson, then you pair him with another battering ram of a running back, I think that could be a very solid backfield.
I never thought about Harris, but when you said that, you know what it reminded me of? When Baltimore had Gus Edwards. And Gus Edwards would be a guy that I would want to offset, having a reliable running back in the goal line situation, or even the red zone. Goal line, you can trust that guy. He'll catch the ball and he'll give you good downs, but you can get someone that'll get you down the field too. And I think that'd be a great, great pair.
Yeah. I'm on the TreVeyon Henderson train right now, watching him play for the last month.
So if we're talking about draft picks and we're talking at 2, then like I said, I'm going to trade down. The biggest thing that we argue about in our Discord is basically Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. So the way it goes now is Cam Ward looks like the number 1 pick, but we got a lot of time. Then Shedeur Sanders is the next one. We know our boy, what's that? I can forget his name now. Gage. Yeah. Gage Tucker. Sorry, Gage. I don't know why I forgot your name. He wants Shedeur Sanders. I want nothing to do with Deion Sanders. And the idea behind this, and give me your thoughts. if Shedeur Sanders was just a Sanders and not Deion's kid, would he be the tie? You know, because one thing I do like in looking at his numbers, and the one thing that we lack with the Browns, is he seems to be really good with the screen game. You know, he's got the 7th most or the 4th most amount of yards. Can't remember what the exact rating was through the whole NCAA football, all 120 whatever teams. He's got high up there with it, right? But he's playing against Pac-12. The games that he did play against, like BYU, they play Auburn this year, I think. I also played two other teams. I don't have it up right now, but he didn't do as well against SEC Big Ten teams as he did. Oh, it was Nebraska is what I'm thinking, as well as he did against the Pac-12. So maybe I'm just looking too much into it, because a lot of times when guys say this, when you get in an argument, you're overthinking the situation. Am I overthinking it, or what do you think about this kid?
So obviously I haven't, like, it's not like I've been watching a lot of film, but I watched some Colorado games this year. I think the Deion stuff is a little bit overplayed. Like, Deion is the same as a coach as he was as a player, but he also knows that he knows the NFL. You know what I mean? Like, he knows. I don't think he's going to jeopardize his kid's future by being he's not LeVar Ball, is basically what I'm trying to say. Okay. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? But the thing I like about Shedeur Sanders, especially in a Kevin Stefanski offense, is Cam Ward reminds me of he would go play well in the Commanders offense, you know, with a Cliff.
Does he remind you of Jameis Winston? Does he remind you of Jameis Winston a bit when he came out? The leadership, the big arm, mobile enough, you know? I don't know. Like, Jameis Winston wasn't throwing interceptions like he does now in college. I know they're both from Miami, like a get back comparison too, but he kind of reminds me of the same guy. Maybe I'm just out there.
Are you talking about with Cam?
Yeah.
So I think Cam's like a lot better of an athlete though. Like, he can move, he can run. He's a big dude. But I feel like Shedeur, and maybe, again, I haven't watched, it's not like I sat down and watched hours of film, but he feels to me more like NFL pro offense ready in terms of pocket awareness. He's crazy accurate. Like, I watched some Colorado games and he puts the ball on the money. His arm's not huge, and a lot of people kind of worry about that in Cleveland, but especially if he's not starting right away, maybe by the time he's a starter, we're going to be playing half our home games inside anyways, you know, so he's not going to have to.
I got the stats for you. So I'm bringing up PFF right now. So he gradually got better with his overall grade. So he went from 83.7 to 88.4 to 90 in his 3 years. His passing grade overall is 90.6. His intermediate grade is 92.8. His deep grade, I didn't get this. Okay, so he's 94.9. No pressure, he's about the same, 93.3. And then the pressure grade is 64.3, right? So what I was getting at was the screen yards is 8th overall at 692 of his yards that he got were screen. So that's pretty good. I mean, the only thing that he lacks on is he's 134th in average yards per target. So he only targets guys 8 yards down the field. And then there's something else. His drop rate. Is the time to throw is high. He's 147th overall at 3 seconds. Okay. So that tells me, like, I'm hearing that he diagnoses plays, but is it he's not diagnosing fast enough at 3 seconds, or he's running around making plays, and that's the 3 seconds.
Are you talking about Cam or Shedeur?
Shedeur. I'm giving you all Shedeur stats there. Sorry.
So when I think about the thing with Shedeur is, he had to overcome a lot to still play at a high level. You know, he isn't Will Howard playing with 5-star offensive linemen, with, you know, 4 5-star receivers, a 5-star tight end, Chip Kelly calling plays, Ryan Day. He's got maybe his biggest hurdle. Pat Shurmur's his offensive coordinator. We know a lot about Pat Shurmur. Offensive line is not good. Zero running game. The zero running game in Colorado. So it was literally him and Travis Hunter, and they still went out there and they were able to put up numbers, and he was able to play at a high level. So I kind of like that he wasn't surrounded by nothing but 5 stars. He wasn't playing behind an Alabama offensive line. He didn't have, a Derrick Henry to turn around and hand the ball off to. Like the offense was him trying to get the ball to Travis Hunter, and everybody that they played knew that's what the offense was, and they still managed to play at a high level. So that's kind of what I like. That's what I like about Shedeur. Again, I haven't done hours of film breakdown or anything like that. This is just off the cuff stuff from the little bit I watched him. I think he fits he could fit a Kevin Stefanski offense.
Who would fit better in your opinion then? Would it be Ward or would it be Sanders?
To me, it would be Sanders. I feel Cam Ward he needs to be more in a Commanders with like a Cliff Kingsbury, a Ben Johnson.
Okay.
He reminds me more of a college quarterback than Shedeur does, at least just from like the little bit I've seen of them. But
if we're on the topic of Colorado and the high picks, number 2, then what do you think about the Heisman Trophy winner?
So I'm firmly on the side of I don't want to draft a defensive player in the first round, but Travis Hunter is a very, very good corner who could give you – he's not going to be able to play them both all the time, but if he could play corner and then you have some packages for him on offense, I would maybe consider taking him because he's a corner and it's such a high need position on defense, especially when we play so much man with Jim Schwartz and with Denzel's concussion history. I feel like Denzel's he's one bad hit away from maybe having to retire at any moment. And, Martin Emerson seemed to regress. You don't know what you got behind Denzel. He's kind of the glue that keeps that secondary together. So I would not be 100% opposed to Travis Hunter, but I very much think that you need to go offense in the first round. You can't have one of the worst offenses in the history of the NFL and then go draft a defense when you have the number 2 overall pick. At least not in my opinion. Like you have to go offense. The only way my attitude changes about that is if somehow we just add an insane amount of high power offensive weapons in free agency. So, obviously this is all dependent on what we do in free agency.
Yeah, that's going to be a big determining factor, and I totally get that. I still, to run Stefanski's offense, I'd like to see that running back, but I get the value of getting guys down low. I mean, there's even a guy in North Carolina. He's a big 220-pound kid. I mean, that could probably work. I would like to see. I mean, if I had my druthers, I would stick with Ford as a third down back. I'd like to have Chubb as our goal line runner, come back for the fans, and I'd like to get somebody. I would like to get Genty, but I mean, you've talked me into Henderson, and I like Scatterboat. He's awesome, man. Like I want to see some tough leadership because actually, maybe even to get back to the question about our culture, when we started, we were tough, we were accountable and smart. We were none of those this year. And I feel toughness out of what I've seen through the entire playoffs. We're talking about Scatterboot then because he's throwing touchdowns, he's catching touchdowns, and he's running in touchdowns. He seemed like a badass.
No, I think my only thing that worries me about him is his top end speed, which is why I think that's a guy you pair with a guy like Henderson and they could complement each other very well.
Yes, good point. Good point.
Wrapping up, I guess, draft talk a little bit. Some of the things we wanted to see. This might sound like a homer pick. I would draft as many Ohio State guys as possible. and I don't say this every year. I am always been like, why don't we pick Ohio State guys? But sometimes there's Browns, Ohio State fans that are just think you should pick every single Buckeye ever when there's clearly better players available. But I think this Ohio State team is loaded with NFL talent. If you pick a quarterback at 2, I would, if you could find a way to get back up high enough to get Emeka Egbuka to add to the wide receiver room. I think he's super underrated in this country because he plays next to Jeremiah Smith. I think he's going to be very good, but every mock I do, he goes in like the 15 to 16 range. And I don't know what you'd have to give up to get back up that high, to move up 15, 16 spots to get back up into the first to get him. I would take Jack Sawyer at some point, depending on how high his stock is risen. Jack Sawyer reminds me of a guy who's going to get drafted by the Steelers and haunt us for 10 years. That's just the kind of, like, that's what it reminds me of. Travion Henderson, Quinshot Junkins, the tackle, and I'm having a.
What about Cardinal Tate?
I'm pretty sure he's only a sophomore. He's going to be back at Ohio State.
Oh, I thought he's popped up coming out. Okay, my bad.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought he was young. So there's a lot of Ohio State guys I would draft. Tez Johnson out of Oregon is a receiver that has been there in like third or fourth round for me in mocks. He's a nice catch yards after the catch kind of guy. So I think you got to put a whole bunch of offensive firepower into this. I do want to address the Abdul Carter thing. And I'm not saying he doesn't have a chance to be awesome. And if the Browns end up drafting him and he's awesome, that's all, cool. And if we pick him out, I'll be pumped. Here's my biggest point about him and why I'm not taking him at 2. And it's the same point I've made about Miles before. Miles is a top, player in this league, and we drafted him at number 1 overall, and he's been amazing. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But it doesn't lead to wins for the Browns. And drafting Abdul Carter, even it doesn't lead to wins. People talked about that Penn State Notre Dame game, and they're like, look how much of an effect he's having on this game. You got to draft him. Look how good this guy is. He played out of his mind. They could not block him. He was a game wrecker, and they lost. That is my point. Without the quarterback, it doesn't matter. He played an amazing game against Notre Dame, and they don't have a quarterback, and they lost. You know what I mean? So it doesn't move the needle to wins enough for me to take a defensive edge rusher there at 2 when there's offensive guys that you're coming off a historically bad offensive season. You have to hit on quarterback eventually. You have to. So that's where I address the Carter thing.
Kind of like you were saying when we were talking about Hunter, right? Like, I mean, when you're historically bad in one part of your football team, you need to compensate for that in some manner. And right now the draft is what we have to talk about, because really we don't know who's going to be available in free agency because of, the tenders they can put down on the guys and re-signings and all this kind of stuff, right? I actually just did a quick mock draft while you were talking. And do you want to hear what I got?
Yeah, go ahead.
No. I only did the first 4 picks. So I traded my number 2 pick. I traded it to the New Orleans Saints, and I got back the 9 pick. Obviously, I got number 40. I got 162, and I got a first rounder next year, and I got Shaheed because I need a burner. Okay, I picked up Genty, then I picked up Cameron Williams at tackle at 33. Then I picked up Jalen Monroe at number 40. And then I picked up a cornerback with the next pick, Zaire Alexander. But that's what I did. So if we're going to sit a guy that's got a lot of potential, I mean, would you still go for maybe a development if it's 2 years, if we got a Fields, or 3 years, or like Jordan Love, wait for 4 years, or you're still stuck, or not stuck, you're still sticking is what I meant to say, with Sanders or Ward if they come available.
So the only way I'm moving off of 2 is they'd have to offer me something that is just like unheard of,
Okay.
Like something that is just like we cannot say no to this. Like they're going to basically give us their firstborn. Then I would consider it. But now I've done mocks both ways. I've stayed at 2. I've traded back to 6 or 7. I did one with the Raiders where I got their second round pick and their first round pick next year in Max Crosby, which they said yes on PFF. So who knows? That would be something interesting.
It's got to be true.
Yep. So I've done all kinds of different mocks just to kind of see what was going to happen. But no, I like it.